Before I start, I need one or two people to pray for intercession, and I'll be a clear vessel. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Eric. I appreciate that. God will flow through me and not be obstructed by me. The problem with the story, though, is that Sarah and Abraham are 100 years old. Right? The problem with the story, yes, it is a funny story, but the problem is that they're 100 years old. The problem is that we read that story and we think, that's a tough one. It's a tough one to hear. It's a tough one to believe. It's a tough one. But the truth is, as we look at that story, we see that there are really three ways we can go with that story. Three meanings that we can pull out of it. One is the one that we learned as a kid. Right? We learned in Sunday school, we learned all through growing up, and it's still functional even as adults. And it's that meaning that simply says, with God, all things are possible. It's a powerful thing. It really is, because we get so laden and dragged down by life, or we get discouraged. And that's a powerful message. When I was a coach at Augsburg in Minneapolis, I remember in my first week there, young boys being what they sometimes can be, a few of them had tattoos here and there, and this young kid had that verse tattooed right across the back of his calf. I remember watching him lift one day and seeing that, with God, anything is possible. I thought that was pretty cool. I mean, as tattoos go, if you got to have a tattoo, that's not such a bad one to have, I guess. I'm not advocating tattoos, I'm simply saying it's not a bad one. So there's that meaning. But the truth is, as we read the Bible, you can pretty much extract that meaning from every story of the Bible. Really, every story of the Bible gets back to that exact point. With God, anything is possible. Right? The story of Jonah being swallowed by a whale. The story of Elijah going up into heaven on a chariot. The story of Noah. The story of Adam. The stories of David. The story of Jesus. With God, anything is possible. So what we got to do then in this case is A, take that and run with that meaning and crack it open and see what else there is. So meaning one, and you actually get your choice today. This is sort of drive-through sermon today. You get to pick which meaning you need this week. So that's meaning one. Meaning one is, with God, anything is possible. Now, moving on to meaning two. One of the methods of teaching that Jesus employed was the use of what's called a parable, right? We all know that. Parable simply is split into two words. It comes from the Greek. Para means alongside. Paramedic, not an actual doctor, but someone who works alongside doctors, who's out in the field, right? Para-transit. It's not your own car, but it's some sort of other vehicle, such as a bus or a train, something like that. So a bull comes from bolus, which means to throw. It means to throw. So it's to throw something alongside. So when Jesus taught, he was throwing these stories alongside their own life. He made these stories up. The parable of the talents, the parable of the Good Samaritan, the parable of the vineyard owner. He used fictional stories to throw alongside their lives. To throw alongside the lives of these people as a way of instructing their lives. That's what a parable is. So if we were to consider this story of Abraham and Sarah as a parable, there are a few meanings we can extract, but one in particular. And that is simply what we were looking at here with the kids. This notion of laughter. It's perfect. This notion of laughter. So you need to understand that Sarah and Abraham had gone well into old age. They had lost hope. Lost hope that they would have the one thing they most wanted. See, when Abraham was much younger, he had been given a vision. And his vision for his life was that he would have many descendants. In fact, it was promised to him by God. But here he is now well into old age. And he can't have those many descendants without a son. Well, he had a child by one of his servants, and the child's name was Ishmael, right? But he wanted it of his own blood and of his wife Sarah's blood. And those would be his descendants. So he's here in the old age, and he still hasn't had that one male that he needs. And so they're told, he and Sarah are told by these visitors, God in the presence of these three visitors, they're told, you're going to have a child. And what did they do? The same thing every one of us do when we've lost hope. The same thing we do when we've not only lost hope, but when you have utterly lost hope and you've moved on. When you've utterly lost hope that the thing you most wanted, and you fought for, and you waited for, and you hoped for, and you yearned for, and you finally let go, and then somebody says, long afterwards, oh, by the way, that thing you really wanted, you're going to get it now. What do you do? It's ridiculous. You laugh. I'm never going to get it. Have you ever had that? Where you've lost so much hope, where you're not even sad anymore. Where it's like, just that old line from Seinfeld, he would always say, you know, when somebody would do something that was very much in character, or when something would go utterly wrong, he would say, that's about right. That's about right. You know, have you ever had that where everything seems to be going wrong, and it just keeps going wrong, and you say, that's about right. And you just sort of throw up your hands. Well, you get enough of that. That's about right. And you reach a point where you just laugh. I had a period of about 3 or 4 years in my life where problems just kept compounding and compounding and compounding. They got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I would say to myself, and I had reached this point where I would laugh when something else would go wrong. And I made the fool's mistake of saying, well, can't get any worse. Bad idea. It always gets worse, especially if you think it can. And I would imagine, I know this is silly, but I would imagine God laughing. Not maliciously, but semi-maliciously, sort of like a big brother would laugh. Oh, Sven, I can make it a little worse. All right, let's play. He'd stick it to me a bit and beat me down a bit, and I'd get back up, maybe a little bit stronger, maybe a little bit tougher, maybe have him growing a bit. I'd say, well, I can't get any worse. Yeah, well, then I'll play. But it's that notion of laughing. It's that notion of having utterly lost what we wanted. That when we finally have the opportunity to have it, it seems almost impossible to believe. That it just springs up this laughter at the irony of life. Right? I wanted it, I wanted it, I wanted it. Abraham and Sarah wanted it and wanted it and wanted it, and their lives just expanded and expanded, and they eventually just sort of let it go. And then it was laid in their lap, promised to them, and she laughed. Of course, the funny little side note is that God says to Abraham, did Sarah just laugh at me? And Sarah says, it's right in the Bible, and Sarah says, no, I didn't laugh. I wasn't laughing, God. And God, it's like there's this conversation, this mini conversation, this big drama, there's this mini conversation. She said, no, I didn't laugh. And God says, yes, you did. So she disbelieves God, she laughs at God, and then she lies to God. But she still gets the kid. So sometimes we can mess up, sometimes we can, fly in the face of God a bit, but God's understanding. But it's kind of interesting, actually, because it harkens back to the story in the garden, right? When Adam and Eve eat of the fruit, and Adam says, I didn't do it. She did it. You know, it's like God doesn't know. And God's laughing. He said, what, am I stupid? I made you, I made all this, I made it in 7 days, or however long it took me. And you think I don't know? But it's comical. This is one of these few times in the Bible where we actually get to laugh. There are 39 references to laughter in the Bible. Laughing. But most of them are, or over half of them are, this phrase called laugh them to scorn. Laughing as a form of ridicule. You'll see it through Psalms, you'll see it through Job and so forth, that your enemies will laugh at you. They will mock you. So laughter as a form of derision or as a form of put down. But this is one of the stories where it isn't that. This is one of those stories where it's actually joyful. There's another mention of it in Ecclesiastes as well. A time to mourn and a time to laugh. We don't get a lot of references in the Bible. It's always so serious. But this is one of those times, and what triggers the laughter this time is the utter preposterousness of it even considering that this could happen.